Hope you had a nice Memorial Day. That's a holiday in the United States, of course. Uh, and yeah, my brain was a little too fried at the end of the day to come back for more. But now we're back. Oh, I should probably, let's see, let's update the stream title. I think we are on day 20 or possibly 21 of all of the stuff that we've been doing for moving to Gas County. And so, as a quick refresher, we're trying to use the agent orchestrator Gas City. And we're to the point now where we have messed around with two sort of different levels of interacting with Gas City. One of those levels is, well, I guess we'll say three. Level one is just talking to the mayor and asking it to do stuff. Level two, we have been trying to apply the agent setup and scheme to a little project we call incremental that's trying to create 2D puzzle games. Deterministic ones where there's only one solution, where the user can get some starting information and then finish the puzzle completely logically. And then the third thing is kind of in between the mayor and the rig. And the thing that's in between there is sort of like a notion of departments or a concierge who knows who all of the specialists are in a city and can deliver who's supposed to work on something when asked, and can route work. And each department or agent, if you want, is intended to sort of share what it's capable of, and then you know it should be able to, I guess, if I could describe this the right way, accept or reject work, work within its specialty, create the artifacts that it says it should inside of its sort of way of work, and then derive lessons that build its institutional knowledge in its specialty. And the idea that we're going for with all of this is that anybody could do this work. Anybody could use these tools to create these same kinds of artifacts and apply them to a certain area, right? But there's an opportunity cost in doing any of this work inside of this city, right? The opportunity cost is something like I chose to work on this, I chose not to work on that. And that means that the tokens that I'm using are all going to create institutional knowledge in a certain domain, product area, right? And that domain or product area, if it's not sort of hopelessly derivative, it's going to be unique, not in the training data, right? And that means that the world-class expert on how to do this domain in the context of the little company that we're creating is going to be inside of our company, nowhere else. And that provides a sort of a moat for what we're doing. So if we invest and we derive some world-class results in categorizing puzzle games by their underlying mathematical formalisms, which is something that gets done in the literature at times. Some of the more famous of these games get studied. They're interesting. You poke at them for a while and you find underlying result in graph theory, or you find a say isomorphism reduction, if you want, to like an NP complete type problem, and uh, and you go, okay, these are really complex. They're fun. They have some mathematical truth underneath them, with the idea that if we manage to find a new game, we'll be judging it against all of the games that have come before, and to be able to say this isn't isomorphic to any existing game, or its distance from these other mechanics and other puzzles is far enough that we can be sure that even if it's not good, at least it will be new. Um, and you can put new in quotation marks, right? Like it's probably true that all of the 2D puzzles share enough mechanics and overlapping mm, feel, if you want, that we're not going to just do something totally new. We're going to do something that's familiar and yet different. And so part of the goal of this little project is to go, will I know it when I see it? Can I create a sense of novelty out of the existing prior art? Can I train my agents on that? Are they going to take a view on this that hasn't been taken before? And what data could we bring to bear to make those kinds of decisions? And as I'm working on that and working on that, I'm putting distance between myself and the existing training data, right? I'm getting data that nobody else has. And somebody else could go through all the same steps that I am. I'm putting this all on camera. You can type at your own agents. You could do it all over again. Um, but in the time that it takes you to sort of recreate all my struggle, these 20 days of moving to Gas County, these maybe 10, 15 days on this particular project. Um, Number one, I can just keep on going that direction, keep digging further and further. If you believe there's some kind of first mover advantage for this area, then you'll believe that uh, if you come up with a relatively new idea or a new approach to something, that you are the first mover. And it doesn't matter if people are the second, third mover behind you. You are already coming through and taking kind of the oxygen for that business idea. You could also believe, for instance, that if there are many movers available, if there's room for a lot of winners inside of this, and I kind of believe that. I kind of believe that in the world of mobile game entertainment, there's room for lots of winners, although there are very few hits, and there might be not all room for someone to have a great hit. That's not exactly the goal. The goal is kind of to shake out that middle layer, right? The one that says, can I stand up a set of departments that are aimed at a certain business area? Can I give them repeatable business processes? And then can I set them loose? And so we're trying to get there. We're trying to get to set them loose, improve yourself, that kind of thing. And to do that, we're trying to use this concept inside of Gas City, which is called the pack. And the point of the pack is to create reusable sections of a city, right? To create reusable agents, to create reusable formulas, and to be able to kind of mix and match them into our city so that we can design the new city to our liking. We could borrow stuff from the community, or we could contribute our stuff back to the community. So, for instance, I might be interested in not sharing my potentially proprietary puzzle game project, but I might be interested in sharing the stuff that I have done for routing, for instance, and departments, because I think that's important and interesting. And I'd like it to work well so that I can use it. All right, so that's sort of where we've been getting to, and we've been spending the last couple of days on packs because pack seems to be the organizer for the things that are going to make your city unique. And we also have this paint that I'm going to, well, diagram. We scrawled this on tablet somewhat painfully last session because perhaps it's hard for me to run my webcam and the capture card at the same time. Still working out the kinks on that, but here is the diagram that we came up with. You can kind of ignore my face down in the corner there. And to go through this diagram a tiny bit, we had in the blue the particular project that we're doing, which is the sort of puzzle project that has specific agents that have specific workflows tied essentially directly to them and to their knowledge base. They have some more generic workflows. Here, maybe I can use my mouse little pointer. There we go. We have these more, I could even, let's do some highlighting and uh, undoing and stuff. So here we've got our agents. Here we've got the specific formulas. Here we've got some generic formulas that potentially say like all of the different specific agents need to do these things. They might need to accept or reject work based on their charter. That's over here. They can, you know, perform that work by looking at their notes. Possibly they have to do new things. But the charters are intended to be encompassing enough that even if they don't have a note or a specific way to do something or a particular formula, they know that it might be their job to come up with something and based on their existing knowledge base or tools. Here we have Oracle, which is essentially, we feel there's a broad-based need to accept questions about the knowledge base that each one of these guys is forming. I've been calling that knowledge base notes, essentially. But in the long run, we think that in order to be worth anything, in order to stretch beyond the training data of these models, we're going to be learning new facts, generating new information, taking new perspectives. And it's not like there's ever a limit to that. You can always take a new perspective on old information. And so there will always be ways to slice and dice and change the level of abstraction of the information that you already know. And my intuition, which again we haven't proven out yet by making some big product and watching all of this work like clockwork, but the intuition is that by taking a certain perspective and giving these things a somewhat limited scope and knowledge base, they'll be able to evolve inside of their niche, just like human do in the human company. And they will become experts, a new kind of expert that hasn't been needed outside of this business area. Okay, so we've got our individual agents in the project. Here I mentioned a concierge that makes the yellow pages, knows who's in it, knows who to call when there's something strange in your neighborhood, right? You can ask this guy who to call, and then that work can get routed out to the appropriate resolver. Um, we have a mayor that could notice. Essentially, the reason we've got mayor in here is because it's sort of the final arbiter of escalations. The concierge might try to route a piece of work a few times through a few likely suspects and then go, I give up. I can't figure out who's supposed to do this. Is it supposed to be somebody new? And the mayor, the smart one, the most flexible one, might go, oh, okay, maybe I need to actually create a new agent with its own charter and capabilities and so on, and go. So we've got onboarding the department, we've got routing to those departments, we've got departments evolving, creating their own knowledge bases, answering questions, accepting and performing work using particular business processes. And we said last time that if we were going to do this, we'd like to be able to factor all of this appropriately, right? We'd like to be able to factor this rig of puzzle making so that a lot of its information is hidden from the outside, right? So that the well-formed interface that they give is sort of these capabilities right here. And it's like, if you know the capabilities of an agent, then you'll ask them to do something. And the way that they'll do that is unknown to you, hidden behind the black box, potentially hidden behind another service, another city, something like that. And so we're trying to understand what it means to be service oriented inside of the context of Gas City and the right way to organize all this stuff. And we mentioned the fact that even though we have this sort of view where rigs are kind of encapsulated away from everything, and the concierge is just supposed to be routing work and not supposed to know how it's all going to get resolved. And similarly for the mayor, um, you know, right now it's all sort of smushed together. The mayor can just say, "Oh, you want a certain kind of work? Let me look up who that is in the concierge data. Oh, I'll just do the work, the one that's stored in here." And it's true, the mayor can sort of ram through those walls and lines of responsibility. There's nothing stopping them from doing that, but you're losing something important, right? Which is if the mayor is doing everything and it's going to forget once it's done, once I start a new session, then where are the lessons going to go from whatever the mayor learned or did? Who's going to own those artifacts? Who's going to incorporate them and bring them into its knowledge base? And so that's what we're trying to kind of get away from. We're trying to get away from um, a software design where the mayor is just doing everything. Um, in that vein, we talked as well about Conway's Law, right, which says that the communication structures of the organization cause the structure of the software. And that's what's happening over here, too, right? We would like to be able to make puzzles that have different modules that correspond to some of these agents, right? The prototyper and the UI layer and the catalog of previous games, and to build things up out of all of that knowledge. And it's going to be hard to do that uh, if the mayor is just, taking all of this data, trying to hold everything in its head at once, and, just starts writing code and isn't obeying those kinds of modularization. And so you can also look at the work that we're trying to do as trying to like force modularization in some sense. And so what do we want? Um, yeah, so coming up with some sort of ideas around this. Last time we were talking about making sure we can encapsulate rigs away from each other, making sure that we can encapsulate separation of concerns, um, and making sure that the mayor doesn't know how to ingest a new puzzle type into the catalog, but that it knows how to ask somebody to do that. We talked a little bit about the way that libraries are versioned and how it might be important to create a city that's made up of a bunch of different packs. And those packs might in turn be made up of packs and so on. And so we're solving a sort of similar problem to like the gem file or Maven or something like that. We have different aspects that we think would be useful across many types of agents that conform to a certain like mm, superclass, if you want. Like it's hard because we don't quite have the right words for this. Like if we were trying to make a compiler, then we would be talking about language structures and how inheritance works and that kind of thing. But instead, we're talking about, how do I compose an agent out of various pieces that I want it to be able to do. Um, we also want this sort of requirement of artifacts, right? Like, not only do I want the agents to be set up a certain way and formulas to be set a certain way, but I want them all to do work in more or less the same way, right? Take a look at your knowledge base, look at the tools and formulas at hand, see if you need to invent something. But if not, just go ahead and do what you know how to do. And then we've got this idea of mix-ins, right? Which kind of, some of these things kind of come together, right? Like we'd like to be able to uh, add multiple capabilities to a single agent. We'd like to be able to give them different aspects. So Oracle is the Oracle capability on agents, probably a mix-in, a way of accepting work. That they all run the same formula to accept work is the way that it works right now. But all this was done in a kind of ad hoc way. Like the mayor and I were just making up stuff. We had formulas on our side, we had agent prompts on our side, but we want to see if we can get the pack system on our side. So today, that after this sort of long preamble, that's what we're going to try to do is to uh, get these things on our side. Okay, 20 minutes. Uh, a little bit longer than I was hoping to go. Um, so now, now that we've got that sort of, how can we learn about this, the way that packs work right now in Gas City, through this lens? And so, if I could fade this in and out, I would. But just keep in mind, this is the lens that we're going to kind of be applying. The things that we want, the way that we want to do encapsulation, separation of concerns, and versioning is probably the top two important things. But also that we've been creating the same kinds of requirements and artifacts for each one, that in order to make this system work, this workflow, this of accepting work, we needed all of this stuff, right? Uh, so that the agent could go, does this fit my charter or not, right? So we've already looked a little bit at these user-facing guides. I didn't find them to be too enlightening, to be honest. It's very mechanical, but not very philosophical, if you want. So we're going to give these one more try. The config reference for pack v2. It's not in, so we have this ngdocs design pack v2 that we're looking at. I guess that's up here too. And then we're looking at my copy, but I just synced from the main mothership. So we should have all of the latest changes. And so we can look at the rollout and history and that kind of stuff. We can look at the conventions and all that thing. But what I really want to understand is um, where are we going for all of these like mix-ins and versions and compiling and that kind of stuff, conflicts, polymorphism, Um, yeah, because you can see the analogies, right? And rather than doing a sort of ad hoc implementation of it, wouldn't it be great if we had a very well motivated, well structured implementation of how to build packs out of packs and what to do when they all come together? So let's try this first file, docs reference config.md. And then in lieu of that, we're going to be looking at this directory and just trying to pop through some of these, understand them, and then we'll try to look at the current code and tests. And hopefully by the end of this session, we'll have thought through everything we need to do to reorganize our pack implementation. And this digression, I think, was also motivated by wanting to pull in some of the sort of community vetted content on Gastown as a pack. And what I mean by that is that Gastown is sort of the original implementation of Gas City, and Gas City was intended to be an SDK in which you could re-implement Gastown. And one of the ways that they tried to do that was to create a Gastown pack that had all of the agents and formulas and working agreements, health checks, that kind of thing that make Gastown kind of work. And we have been kind of fumbling our way toward the design decisions that caused Gastown. Right? And when I tried to explain this to my mayor and say, hey, what crazy things would start happening if we used the Gastown pack and started doing their stuff, it started pushing back really hard. Like, you know, we've just been wasting all of our time here, and we've been creating this system that isn't compatible or doesn't do the same thing as Gastown. And what if you brought in a new mayor? Would I cease to exist? That kind of stuff. Um, it was a very funny conversation. I definitely advise you to look back in the videos for the end of that. But all right, let's give this a try. Docs reference config, and I'll leave this tab open so that we can try to do it. Okay, great. Oh yeah, and I have got the issues open as well. Like I think this is sort of our other good entry point into how people are thinking about these issues today inside of the community, inside of the project, and then what how does our thinking line up with what's going on already? What have people already trying to work on, and what improvements might we be able to contribute? That's the goal. Okay, schema for the pack v2 deployment file for Gas City instance. Pack definitions are in pack toml and conventional pack directories. So as I mentioned before, we definitely criticize this because we're not able to encapsulate rig level stuff, or you could say like import level stuff, namespaces. Um, I feel like it's more like if you have some of these things that are designed to work together, agents, formulas, orders, and commands, and you could add other tools, artifacts, knowledge bases, right? If we have a bunch of this stuff that's intended to work together, then it should be encapsulated together, and you shouldn't be able to have one without the other. If you deleted an artifact in, well, it is, I guess, how do I put this? One of the ideas of modularity in programming is that the modules that you create should be highly cohesive. They should take all the parts that they need to work, especially the parts that are implementation versus interface, and hide the implementation behind the interface. And one of the criticisms that we made here is that there's no way to hide this stuff away from each other. Uh, you could mix and match formulas that have nothing to do with a certain agent. So here, for example, so we have a bunch of agents all together. There are some for specific rigs. There are some that are more generic. These ones are like looking at source code. This is for an unrelated rig. This is for a sort of meta agent that knows all the agents. This is the meta agent, the top level of the top level, right? And they're all together. Yeah, they're not arranged in any kind of hierarchy, and they're not encapsulated away from each other. So if the mayor wants to do something, uh, I guess you could say that there's a sort of flat hierarchy or no hierarchy, right? But you'd also have to say things like, uh, they're all sort of swimming in the same soup, and I could order the butler to do a task that was in the puzzle domain, and it wouldn't have been prompted about it or anything, so it would just try to do its best. It also hasn't been prompted to accept work, so the concierge could try to send work to it, and it wouldn't know how to do that. It would be like, "What are you talking about?" Where in all of these guys that have been briefed, um, they know how to respond to requests for work. They know how to check their charter. They have a charter. You see what I'm saying. And then when we look uh, in a similar way at formulas, um, actually, let's here we go. Now we can have them kind of side by side. Um, yeah, you can see that some of these formulas are sort of tagged to the inventor. There's no rule in Gas City that says the mayor cannot use the inventor's formula. And there's no rule that says that the presenter or the butler can't do the inventor's formula. But the problem is that they're not necessarily equipped to do it in a cheap way. We're trying to do all of this so that the expert can iterate to doing something more cheaply, with more knowledge, with better tools, with better prompting, whatever it is. There's going to be like a variety of ways for it to do that. And if we can get those feedback loops going inside of the individual departments, make sure that they're always learning and improving, eventually they'll outstrip the others, so that it's like you wouldn't want to send a butler to do a playtester's job. And that's totally human way of thinking about it, I guess. Um, like, if this is all just the same model wearing a different mask, you know, then it doesn't make sense to have all of these labels, right? But if we are actually going to take advantage of the fact that we can have these separate spaces for each of these agents, then we want it to evolve away from the ability of the butler to run this formula that is specific to playtesting. Playtesting being like, solve this puzzle like a human would, right? Use heuristics and things like that that are within the human sphere. Uh, where this guy is more like, be a computer for me, would you? And make sure that this puzzle is mathematically correct. And feel free to use a SAT solver or um, computational methods that would be far beyond the reach of a human being, like, smartly testing all significant possibilities or something like that, that would just blow our mental stack and it can handle with no problems, or could write a program to solve, or something like that, right? We don't think that this guy should be able to do this guy's job. I clicked backwards, but you get the idea again. Okay. All right. Use imports for PackV2 composition. Legacy includes packs and agent fields remain visible for migration compatibility. So we're supposed to be using import. Yeah. All right. So let's start with this. Config fragment files to merge into this config. And so we've got city as well. We're up at the city level. Let's try and skim through this really fast for the headings. City is a top level config. ACP session holds settings for the ACP session provider. I'm not sure what ACP stands for in this context. API config configures the HTTP server. Agent defines an agent. Some of this, it might be that we just need to go through and read more about the internals, and we haven't done all that yet. We've really only done session. Okay, agent. We understand agents at a high level. Lots of important stuff going on inside of agents. Work query, we'll probably get back to that a little bit because we've been editing work queries inside of our system. We've got lots of stuff about the session. Okay, city level agent defaults, such as when you're an agent, assuming nobody tells you different, be Claude Sonnet 4.6 or whatever. Agent overrides for a specific rig. And this is an interesting thing too, right? Where you're definitely like, if I defined an agent down at the rig and it had its own configuration, right? Then it should just override the agent definition at the city level. So why are we providing defaults and overrides when they just boil down to all the things that were already in agent? Agent patching. You're supposed to, and again, this is sort of like, why are we doing all of this when we could have just put it in some kind of override file again, right? So if you think about it, we're working with agents at the city level, defaults if things aren't there. We've got agents at the rig level. We've got patching of those agents by directory. And something just feels a little bit off about it, right? It feels a little bit off to implement like overrides and or polymorphism in this way. And maybe it makes sense to the agents and that's why they do it this way. But I think with some more practical examples, we might be able to tease apart why did this happen. There isn't much configuration for beads because we just want to know where to put them. There's not a whole lot for chat sessions. Idle timeout. This is an important setting. You know, you don't want to auto suspend sessions sometimes. Sometimes you just want them to stay open forever. I don't know what active convergence loops are. um, Controller daemon settings. So the controller, as I understand it, is kind of the actual beating heart of the gas city. It's sort of doing heartbeats and telling people when to do stuff. Um, okay, so we've got Formula V2, and there's Formula V2 graph workflow infrastructure. We haven't gone over formulas. This is probably the other major part of the architecture that we're most interested in because we've been writing a lot of formulas and we've been trying to understand. We've seen some repetition across our formulas and we might feel, how do I compose this part together? How do I include this in all of these different formulas? That kind of thing. We went back and forth on that because we were like, well, at the start of every work formula that the agent is doing, the specialist agent, it should decide if it accepts the work or not. And so for a while, we were like composing the formula for accepting work onto the front of all of these workflows. And we got away from that a little bit. It made more sense to go, no, we're just going to accept the work or not. And if we accept the work, then we might kick out our formula. Or the specialist might decide not to do that formula. It might decide to solve it by looking at this knowledge base or improvising. Yeah. Yeah. So formulas we still have to look at. Yeah. But you can see, for me, this is sort of like uh, the very nuts and bolts kind of stuff about how Gas City gets anything done, how it's managing all of these agents, that kind of thing. Doctor is like trying to fix things that are broken inside of the city. Dolt is the data backend for beads, and it's being used extensively for that purpose. Uh, Events we haven't spent much time with either. but I gather there's an event bus and we could dispatch behavior off that. Um, Max size in bytes, just out of curiosity. That would be 268 megs or something like that. How big the events.jsonl can get. I don't know how they came up with this number. Formulas config, we don't really care about, I guess. Imports, a named import of another pack, which makes sense, right? Um, so here we've got versioning. We've got semantic versioning. I think versions are optional on packs, so right. Um, are this imports visible to the customer? Defaults to true, meaning that if my pack imports another pack, then you can use that directly as if you had imported it directly. It's not a great practice. You would usually want to explicitly include something that you explicitly depend on, but there might be a reason to want to do this. This would be for Kubernetes. Again, they use this without defining it, but it has to do with creating containers for the city, putting agents in containers. Maybe we haven't really looked at that much. Mail, we understand the agents mailing each other to get straight to communicate, sometimes to divide work or to ask questions. We've got model pricing. Yeah, I haven't tried to use this yet, but obviously costing is a huge um, problem or potential area for all of these agents. Like, if we can do the same task for less money, then we obviously want to do it for less money. If we see no, critical benefit in quality, and it's just something that we want to be able to trade off when we want. But yeah, we don't know how to swap between these or take advantage of this yet. We're just doing all of our stuff in. Well, I'll amend that a little bit. The mayor has a certain model. It's like an Opus 4. What are we on 7 model, and some of the agents are defined as lesser tier models with this attached tools and knowledge base, that kind of thing. And the point of doing that, of course, is to save money, right? To do a simpler job for less tokens. And so we do have a little bit of control over that, even at the sort of simplistic level at which we're using these tools right now. Sessions, we know about sessions. It's and it says a canonical persistent session, right? Meaning, no matter what, I always want to have this session hanging around. It's not just a certain kind of agent. It's like, yeah, scope, certain name. It has a name, a city, and a rig. So there's only going to be one session with this city, rig, and name. Ah, I see. One per city or one per rig. So yeah, there'll only be at most one per rig or most one per city. So it's sort of a singleton kind of thing. Okay. I don't think I know what this is about. Order overrides. So we had agent overrides and we also have order overrides, which override schedules, when we're going to trigger either scripts or formulas, that kind of thing. Pack defaults. Pack rig defaults. A remote pack repository. So this is the idea, I guess, that so similarly to how we pull in potentially Ruby packages from Ruby gems, or we pull Perl libraries from CPAN, all kinds of stuff. That's what this is talking about, is that perhaps people are creating lots of packs I don't think I've seen that yet. Is there a pack directory yet? I haven't gotten there yet. Um, or, somebody has defined a pack and you can include it by bringing in one of this source, a subdirectory within the repo at this URL. And then do you want the head or do you want a particular branch or even a commit? So it's sort of like you can depend on a particular pinned version of a certain pack if you want to. There's all kinds of different patches. Pooling has to do with session scaling and the min and max number of sessions. So this is like, again, if we had our antiquarians. So this happened at one point because we were trying to pull in the catalog for antiquarian, and they're like, how many antiquarian sessions should we have? And we came across these settings for pools, and we were like, oh, well, I guess there's already a setting for that inside of Gas City that has to do with pools and multiple agents, that kind of thing. All doing the same job, all with the same scheme. And that took us into concurrent writing because we're managing this knowledge base. We're not just like spinning up multiple copies of the same prompted agent, having them do kind of stateless work and then exit. Instead, we had all this stateful stuff, and we're like, how am I going to do concurrent writes and lessons learned with a bunch of different agents on the same time writing into the file system? And so that took us into a Git repository for our rig, and that in turn took us into like merge queues and should we add the Gastown pack? And so here we are. So you can see that, like, I guess as we're sort of like all of these projects, as we're sort of recapitulating the history of software engineering, and here where I started with a very bare bones Gas City, and I'm trying to recapitulate the development of Gastown, essentially. You come up to these points and you're like, oh, I see. I see the problem that Gastown is intended to solve, and I see why they put this thing in here. It's because it's a simple way to solve concurrent writing, get a bunch of agents working on something at once. Providers are cognition providers, like Claude or Gemini, that kind of thing. And all of this has kind of been hidden from us. We're only using the one provider, Claude, and it's all hidden underneath the session, essentially the session abstracting away all of that stuff, all the interaction with Claude itself. Rig defines an external project registered in the city. It could be internal as well, like we made a rig just for incremental. Now this might be a clue that we're doing something a little weird, right? Like you've got external projects and there's a sort of cross product between projects and personnel, right? With the idea that I could have set up my personnel so that they're generic and they can solve any problem, and not so that they're kind of keepers of the flame and their own individual power centers and knowledge bases and that kind of thing. And that would have made more sense. It would have made less sense uh, in the world where I just have all kinds of functionally defined agents and they can all work on any project. But that does seem to be the way the sort of implied, um, you know, setup worldview of Gas City is that rigs aren't just projects and they're not just ownership areas. You know, they really are independent of the city, and the city is just the people. It's not the work that's getting done in it, and that's a little bit weird. It's like a little bit weird from the point of view of the human company, and it's also a little bit weird from the idea of creating repertoire. Yeah. I guess we haven't said this in Conway's law yet. Um, maybe there's a reverse corollary to Conway's law, which is that as you maintain a software project and evolve it, you're causing the organization of your company too, right? So recall that Conway's law, right, is that communication structures of the organization cause the structure of the software that's to be created. But then the requirements and the needs that that software provides back to the organization, the customer requests or the different ways that you want it to evolve, your requirements from you are going to cause the structure of the needed product to change. And that's going to get pushed towards the structure of the organization. And if you have a generic organization that's just like, I'm a software engineer, you're a QA engineer, you're a UX designer, you're the marketing department, you're the social media person, you run the website, you know, um, none of those jobs change. None of those jobs learn anything. But there's a sort of impedance mismatch there, right? Where the rig wants to, or the project, or the software product, it wants to become more specific and more differentiated and evolve. But then you don't see that evolution mirrored in the communication structure of a bunch of generic agents. Like, what's going on there? I think this is the main question that we're going to take into our ideas about departments, institutional knowledge, and how we want Gas City to be a little different. Okay, things that we know about rigs. Um, the rigs mainline branch. So this is, I think, also an idea that like external projects. Um, this is like source code, like Git repositories, for instance, or whatever other repository. I don't think it's supposed to be specific to GitHub or even Git, perhaps. But what's the default merge target? That kind of thing. And it's sort of the idea that the city is going to adopt something that exists elsewhere and just work on it. They're going to sort of like the city is like MI6, right? And it's going to send its agents out to some place to go do something. They're going to go James Bond that project. They're going to, set everything right and, for Queen and Country. And then they're going to, zip line back out of that project and be ready for the next project. And again, it's a little bit weird if you start talking about, no, you're actually going to this is a one-way trip. We're going to send the agents out into the project and they're going to, build homes and have families and create a community and get really stuck into that project. And over time, that little community is going to evolve until it's its own, well-oiled machine, its own little society. You know, that's the sort of difference between the metaphor that we're seeing here and the metaphor that I'm trying to use. And the funny thing about these metaphors is that we can make them happen. We can cause them to happen using these agents. All right, we've got patches that modify rigs, services. I don't think I've seen this before either, but this is kind of cool. I didn't know that we had HTTP services inside of Gas City per se that we could create configuration for. It sort of looks like a controller owned thing. Yeah, maybe we can delve into this a little bit more. I assume that there's a config somewhere in our city that might use some of this stuff. So just for an example, I don't think I saw much of this in the other parts of the city. Um, okay. I wonder if this was used anywhere in any of the configuration. Maybe we need to start looking from here. All right. Well, while it's thinking about whether or not it can find this anywhere, because it configures a service. We're just trying to look in what this is real fast. Whether the service is private to the workspace, public, or gated by tenant auth. Again, like maybe this is a facility for us to configure our own services and make them available as part of the city, which would be interesting. Like, I think that part of the vision that I have here is that if we were going to service orient all of our cities together, we could ask other cities to do things and maybe it'd come in through this kind of gateway. I don't know. We talked about sessions a little bit. Here, per token type rates. So this is again like related to costing, but we haven't worked much with that yet. Workspaces have city level metadata. Okay, so again, like, and maybe the fourth or fifth way we've seen to override agents, rig patches and agent patches and all that stuff. Okay, it couldn't find this. So inside of our city, it never used this configuration that's related to, um, what was it again? Providers, services. Okay, so at least we looked at it. Not a ton of surprises, I don't think. Maybe the biggest interesting surprise is that we do have some semantic versioning already. It might be under, here we go. Imports of other packs, right? Versioning. Empty for local, which again, not great, right? Unless it considers that like if we don't have a way to define a pack locally as a version, uh, like it would be nice if we were able to start doing that and start to say, yeah, this pack is based on a certain versioning scheme, and we are continuing to evolve it and push it up to. We might do a sort of weird two-step where we're like, oh yeah, we created this pack and it has a certain version, and it's in this remote repository that we control, and there's a path to that repository and a version that we want, which is head or a certain pinned number. And that's a dependency of another pack that we're creating that also has a repository. That's sort of what we're looking for, right? Is like we want to have a well motivated way to organize our packs as versioned libraries with all of their transitive dependencies and all of their glory. Right? Because that way we might be able to share them with others. We might be able to evolve them and test them until we feel like, oh yeah, this is has been put through its paces at the following version list for all of the different packs that are involved. And it's not clear to me yet that we are given the affordances inside of this system to do that. Okay, there we go. All right. Pack V2 rollout design and history. Okay. Let's look at, this seems like the most likely place to go next. GitHub issue this, we could go read. The current model tangles three concerns that should be separate. This is nice. We did mention this in our picture, right? Separate concerns. And the concerns we want to separate are a little bit different than the ones in this document. But at least that is, in spiritual harmony, I guess you could say. So they have portable definitions of agents, providers, and formulas, deployment decisions of rigs, substrates, and capacity, and per machine site binding of past prefixes and suspended flags. Cities are pack-like, but not structured as packs. Yes, I would definitely buy that. And you can take it much further, right, and say, a city is just a pack. Yeah, like they say. This is sort of like the problem before they came out with this version of pack v2. Include semantics are too weak. Collisions depend on load order. There's no version pinning, collision handling, yeah, etc. Conventions and declarations. We want convention to define structure, not doing conditionals. Packs are not self-contained. They can reference paths outside the pack boundary. Yes, that's great. We would want packs to be fully portable, a directory tree plus their declared imports and nothing else. Managed state has no clear home. Okay. Proposed change. The top level of a pack is controlled surface area. Arbitrary files live under assets. Pack provided CLI commands, so this would be a good place to put some of the scripts that we were using as we were creating our formulas for our agents. And I don't think we were doing that really yet. We can double check. I feel like we double checked this earlier. Yeah, there's nothing in here. But if we look through, I feel like we found these earlier. Not under agents, but not under assets either, I don't think. Tools. So here's something that should probably be a command in the commands directory. So we can go and fix that. For the first skills / MCP slice, which I assume means library implementation, right? Only the current city pack is going to be able to contribute skills and MCP catalogs. Imported pack catalogs are a later wave, right? Because if you wanted a pack to contribute skills and MCPs, then they'd have to come in here and commingle with all the ones that are created by other packs. You might be dealing with a sort of dependency hell kind of situation where multiple packs declare different skills at different version numbers, and you're like, which one am I looking at? And do they put all of the same named files into here? And what about clashes? And all solved problems in other contexts, right? Like it's possible to create a project that has multiple copies of the same library and they get resolved appropriately and nobody dies. But yeah, perhaps a problem. Embedded packs, I think this is a new idea. Um, live under assets. I don't know what embedded means. Probably something from someone's conversation with an agent. Yeah. So imports, right? It might be helpful. We're going to take a little digression here, perhaps. Let me see if I can find this. Is there a pack repository? And by that, I don't just mean like, is there a single? Yeah, I looked in the Discord. It doesn't exist. Um, but that I guess what that means to me is that if there are any packs that are being developed for community use, they're in individual GitHub repositories. Okay, cool. I just searched for pack and people are still talking about like how they organize their packs that are reused between cities, shared resources. Um, yeah, there's a lot of different ideas, I guess, in here. Um, but yeah, I think that they are working with kind of the same concerns that we are. There's one message talking about multiple cities with the same supervisor, one city per main project, multiple rigs in their projects, rig scoping packs. So I think that I think, understanding and dealing with the same concerns that the community is right now. That's good. That means that anything that we do to work on this or improve this is probably timely. Assuming that when we look through these issues, we see some of our same um, observations. What makes a city pack different from a regular pack? Very little. Only cities have rigs. Rigs are declared in city.toml, not in packs. This is an interesting idea, which has something to do with everything else works identically. Design principle. If you deleted city.toml, what remains is a valid pack. I mean, to me, that means that this is a very tempting refactoring target, right? Um, don't make city packs different from regular packs. They are the same. And then work around the fact that we don't have that only cities have rigs and that cities have companion city.toml, right? I think it seems like instead a city should have a root pack right here, and a city would have this city.toml, right? And so instead of making it a city pack, we're just going to have one kind of pack. We're not going to have regular packs and city packs, since everything else works identically, since all you need is this file. Uh, and then whatever conventions you apply to regular packs, just apply to city packs too. And we don't have this special case of, oh, well, the city pack, you've got to have a city toml in there and you've got to have these rigs and all, you know. Um, and so you can't share your city pack, right? Um, again, there's something weird about that, right? Um, so another way to put this design principle is a city pack is not a valid pack that could be imported by another city. It's got this extra thing that you can't have in a regular pack, that you can't reuse, that you can't share with the community because it refers to a specific project on your disk or something like that. There's probably a way to put it all together so that if you wanted to share a city or if you wanted to share a pack that had these things, um, the main thing that you are doing, describing a deployment, um, as long as the resources that you need to cause that deployment, like certain Git repository, something like that, um, as long as that's defined inside of here in a way that is publicly available, it's not just a private project, um, then you could share a city pack with no problem. And the interesting thing about a valid pack that could be imported by another city is that if the rig is critical to how the city works or what the city pack is all about, then if you got rid of it, then you wouldn't have something that could be imported and used as by another city, right? Like if two city packs actually grind their gears against each other and don't work together, you want to know that. And you don't want to say, oh, well, as long as you just delete the deployment, then you only have one deployment, the loader won't get confused, and everything is cool. You'll just have you'll have all of this stuff from both packs and only one deployment. It's kind of wrong, right? it's wrong to say that like you could take and talking about like this in terms of like mergers of software companies, right? It's like I'm going to take all the personnel, all of the business processes, all of the institutional knowledge, all that stuff from another company, and I'm just going to throw them into the company they're being merged into. But I'm going to delete their business problem, their projects, and everything will work fine. um, Hilarious, I think. And there's probably a way, you know, how regular mergers go. Um, when the company acquires a company that it wants to keep that business going, perhaps slowly merge into its business, it keeps all of its stuff running. And it might be running for a long time as an independent setup, right? So, for instance, like if I wanted to, um, I'm trying not to use too many real examples here, but one that again, I don't want to talk about things that I know about that were proprietary. Um, let's try, let's do like a book publisher absorbing another book publisher. Again, I'm using the stuff on my bookcase here. And you're like, well, you know, the second book publisher has a bunch of facilities. It has warehouses, it has editors, it has office workers, it has fulfillment. It might have certain, you know, marketing, that kind of thing. And you know, you wouldn't pretend, oh well, I'll absorb all of these people, and I'll kind of ignore the intellectual property they bring with them, all of their books and their authors, and they're just going to work on my stuff. No, you'd probably just have them operate independently as a sort of like a subsidiary inside of your company. And over time, if you want them to adopt your processes, you'd have them migrate slowly so that instead of using their formula, they use your formula. Or instead of using their business process and their institutional knowledge, they start to use yours. And eventually, you'd be working on the projects of that subsidiary company in the same way that you're working on these. And so the projects kind of ascend into being part of the main city's um, projects. So again, I think that like not everything is a metaphor, right? That's not necessarily how all this works. But I think that we can get some kind of suggestive insights here by saying, no, we actually do know a little bit about what you're trying to do here. And we can slap some, if we can use this metaphor that Gas City is like a company and that the agents are like the workers and specialists inside of that company. And this is like, what does that company do? Then, as a merger principle, this is pretty weird. Renaming. Okay. Names and prefixes are managed by the GC command line tool. There are authoritative copies in the .gc directory. Okay, that's cool. This is interesting information, I think. Um, Renaming. You need to rename something in several places. um, Kind of sucks. If there's a mismatch between a rig in City Tom and its managed state, then it will block startup. This is interesting because normally when you need to do three things at once and make them all succeed or all fail together, you write a transaction against an ACID compliant database and you update all three at once. And either the transaction goes through and all three of them update together, or it doesn't go through and none of them get updated. But here, obviously, if something got messed up in the middle, right? Like, say the name got updated and then these steps fail for whatever reason. There's a lightning strike or a power outage or something. Then basically there will be a mismatch, right? And we could have worked around it with a more robust migration policy. We could have worked around it by getting rid of some redundancy potentially too. Um, the name to prefix mapping, and the new prefix. Um, and potentially you could say that like the name to prefix mapping could be the authoritative thing right here. And it's weird that they're copied in two places. And we'll be able to go through all of the source code at some point and see how reliable this document is. Okay. Workspace name and prefix are legacy compatibility fields. To me, this means it almost means please skip this section. uh, pack name is portable and travels with the pack when imported, which means there can be naming collisions too, incidentally. If two people name their pack the same thing, then you're going to have two things that both have the same pack name. The current includes mechanism has three problems. Packs lose their identity after composition. So this is about pack v1, right? Collisions are resolved by load order, and transitive dependencies are invisible. Adding a sub include to a pack silently changes what agents appear in every city that uses it. All right, imports fix these problems. Okay, here's a concrete example. This is nice. All right, we have Gastown version 1.2.0, a certain Gastown pack, right? It has mares, polecats. I guess that's it. I didn't know that. I guess there you can add crew and where's the refinery? You know, all this stuff's missing, but whatever. A city pack can import it so that after import, you can call them by bare name, or you can call them by qualified name to make sure that you're getting the one from this namespace, right? If two different packs use the same agent names, then you can go, I want the one from the Gastown pack. Aliasing. Um, you can alias it to something else, and that's done implicitly by calling it an import right here. Whatever abbreviation you use is going to cause the qualified name here. Um, right. And this, the fact that this worked, gastown.mayor, is only because of this name that was chosen. It doesn't have anything to do with the directory, the path that was chosen. It's just this. That's interesting information. Remote imports use semantic versioning constraints. At least 1.2, for instance. Local path imports have no version constraint, which is kind of weird. Resolved versions are recorded in the lock file, format owned by Pacman. Okay, interesting. So this is something that would be true of a publicly published Ruby library, for instance. Not only do we have a gem file that specifies semantic version constraints like this, but we also have the actual calculation that was done at the time that the um, library was built, if you want. And so if we say at least 1.2, and then we might get a different version of this. You know, we might not just get 1.2, we might get 1.4.9. Whatever actual version was used to satisfy this constraint is what goes in the log file. Which commit each import resolves to, and which directory under the cache holds it. Okay. It doesn't clone git or self-heal missing state. That goes to here. A missing lock entry or cache entry tells the user to run gc import install. Okay. Kind of weird. Like probably you should be able to pass a flag to the loader to say, just install my imports for me, please. And so, you know, you take the user out of the loop. Imports are transitive. if Gastown imports maintenance, Gastown, anyone who imports Gastown also imports maintenance. You can suppress transitive resolution. Inside of the Gastown pack, you would say, this is unusual. I import this for my own use, but consumers of my pack should not see it. I actually don't think this is wrong. It's like hiding the implementation of the Gastown pack from people who are just using it for its agents, right? Not polluting the common namespace with the maintenance workflows, agents, and so on, right? Um, assuming that there is a way to encapsulate those out of the pack, right? And I really do think that this is the right way to do it in general, right? If you want to explicitly import the maintenance pack, then you do. You add an import for it. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure why this is unusual. You can explicitly re-export an imported pack to make it available under a certain namespace too. Remember that this name is the important thing, right? Maintenance's agents are flattened into Gastown's namespace. The consumer doesn't need to know that dog was from maintenance. Yeah. So again, this is like it seems like a really key thing to how packs are intended to work, right? Which is like do I want to expose the surface area of the imported pack, like the maintenance pack, to my customers or not, right? If I want to use the Gastown pack, do I need to get the maintenance agents um, or not? And it might be that you have a design that says, oh, yeah, I'm just trying to sort of build one big happy family. Um, all of those agents that were defined are part of my whole schema, and I'm trying to expose them to you so that you can use them for your own purposes, right? But you could easily imagine it the other way around. Like, say that I had a pack that only provides one agent, but it's implemented in terms of 100 other packs, and I don't want to give you any of that surface area. I just want to give you this one agent that does this job, and then potentially, like we've been talking about, um, say that I had a really well trained mayor that was doing exactly what I wanted to do with departments. There'd be a concierge, and there'd be a bunch of different packs underneath that concierge, or the concierge pack would be built out of the packs underneath, or it could potentially like discover them at runtime. Um, and then all of that's hidden from you talking to the mayor, getting it to do a particular job. And the mayor, it's all hidden from the mayor too. The mayor just knows how to talk to the concierge, right? And the concierge hides all of the complexity or all the routing or all the rest of the company, if you want, from these like CEOs and middle managers and things. There's a lot of reasons to do that information hiding. A big one, of course, is not blowing out the context of, the people up at the top with all of the details of all of the things down in the rest of the company. Um, yeah, let's just put it that way. That's kind of thing that we want to do. That knowing what the company does and what its capabilities are at a sort of high level is more important than knowing how it's done or who's doing it or can I talk to the individual agents if I want to. And so, yeah, this seems like a really important section right here, especially for what we're trying to do, information hiding. Okay, we were talking about this a little bit. Okay, so we can go read about this lock file, which has to do with this important concept for us that, like, if we're going to build packs on top of packs on top of packs, we need to understand how the lock file works. And hopefully it'll be like what we're accustomed to from working with other, um, library version resolvers. Okay, life cycle. Init, import, register, and start. Okay, so this is a little bit of inside baseball, but when we went through the tutorials, we did all of these things. We'd want to do this again, right? As you update a pack, as you provide a new version of it or keep it going, um, you would bump the version. You would get a new version, bootstrapping or repairing packs.lock, materializing all imports into the cache. And that means like going and getting the latest version, potentially, like upgrading. One thing that we haven't really talked about much is let's look at our picture again. Uh, as these guys, the inventor or the antiquarian, learn stuff and grow and add to their knowledge base, that could be happening like around the clock. And if you really want to be publishing their expertise out to other places to share, then every little thing that they do could roll their version. And so there's a sort of question there about when do you roll versions or when do you publish like the latest and greatest? And it doesn't totally fit with the model here, right? Or the model is kind of like you define an agent that's a sort of generic thing. It's not, constantly learning and changing. It's sort of set in stone for a while, and then you use that as personnel that just does a particular job. All right. Rigs are a city concept. This is like what projects are we working on again? And the naming, right? It's again like this is going to be these API tools are going to cause custom.agent. These ones are going to cause gastown.agent. And they produce rig scoped agents. Gastown. Rigs slash gastown.polecat. That would be this rig, right? Gastown, and then inside of here is polecat. And then gastown.polecat is up at the city level. If you add a new rig, then you can add a certain rig import every time. We talked about all of these different directories. I don't think we need to belabor that. They're in a certain order, which I find a little bit interesting. Not particularly, what's the word? Alphabetized, organized. It seems like, uh, yeah. I mean, there is a sort of implied hierarchy here where we look at the pack toml, we look at these convention discovered things, a bunch of other stuff. We have these imported pack catalogs. Oh, right. This is like the not this is at the pack level, but not at the imported pack level, right? They haven't figured out how to merge them together. This is just kind of hanging out here. Um, these are not discovered by convention. They're specific to the pack, I guess. And this is sort of the old version, new version, v1 versus v2. So again, we can mostly skip. We can look at the directory conventions. That would be right here. Ah, layer by priority. Imported pack formulas in import declaration order. Ouch. The city pack's own formulas. and rig level imported formulas. So this has to do with specificity, right? These are so generic that they can be shared across multiple cities. These are specific to a certain city, and these are specific to a certain rig inside of a city. So there's kind of a, let me make sure I'm using this word right. Um, Subsidiarity. This came up recently because the Pope published an encyclical and he went over Catholic social teaching again. And subsidiarity. Let me grab this here. Yeah, but it's still it's a more generic idea that you can see that, yeah, that's Catholic social teaching. But the idea is the social and political issues should be dealt with at the most immediate or local level that is consistent with their resolution, right? Um, it should go. You should go to the most local level that you want. It says it's applicable in a lot of different fields, etc. So yeah, without getting like too in the weeds on that, um, yeah, the importing pack always wins over its imports as well. We're trying to get things as local as possible, and this is also a principle that we would follow in computer science in general, right? Um, that the override beats the inherited configuration. Uh, the polymorphic implementation is used instead of or in addition to the parent, etc. Right? And so that it makes, from that point of view, it makes sense. I think if we were applying this, continue to apply this specificity to knowledge bases and to centers of power or expertise, you'd kind of get the departments thing that I'm talking about. And then it remembers where it's from. We talked about all this before. This felt a little redundant. Let's see. We're about halfway through this 366 paragraph document. Qualification is required when there's two with the same name. That totally makes sense. Pack-wide content, like global session live, applies only to agents that came from the same pack. Global fragments got replaced by template fragments. We'll get to that later, I guess. Yeah. Pack is self-contained. Its transitive closure is its directory tree plus its declared imports. And their declared imports in their directory tree and so on. Any resolved path that escapes the pack directory is an error. That's cool. Okay, per machine state. We haven't talked much about this yet. So remember there were these three pillars, right? There was like the city itself, pack declarations, and then whatever is in the site binding. You're going to add rigs. You're going to turn them off and on. Set some configuration. And then the GC runtime is actually going to manage all of these things on our behalf. Again, so like, why are we using an orchestrator? Why aren't we just using, 100 different Claude sessions and 100 different terminals? Um, there's big advantages to having somebody else taking care of the nuts and bolts of that for you. If it's in a TOML file, then it's definition or deployment. And again, like I would argue, right, like you should have the pack TOML file and you should have the city level stuff in two separate things, right? Why does the TOML file have two different jobs? It shouldn't. All right. This it'll start getting into the weeds a little. It's in our directory. Multi-city rig sharing, I don't think we've seen yet. Again, it's kind of weird, but it's sort of the idea again that like there's a cross product between cities and rigs, and you could have one city or two cities working on the same rig, and that would be fine, or it could be helpful. Not exactly the way that we're defining our specialized rigs or their specialized agents. Now it's talking about things that it didn't do, which, talking about the design proposal. A city is just another rig with different resolution defaults. That's interesting. I don't think that we've come across this exactly yet. Max the unit of composition. That's great. This is not so great, perhaps. Um, Again, say that you wanted to have a pack do a certain job. Um, are you supposed to define an MCP server? Are you supposed to hide all of this stuff? You create a city and then you say, hey, anytime that you want to talk to the city, come in through this front door. And other than that, um, don't go peeking through the city's internals. It's doing its own thing. Okay. Don't have conditional declarations, I think was a big thing here. And then we talked about this. Yeah. Again, a little bit redundant. All right. And okay. So there you go. All right. Well, I hope that's clear. I hope that we're learning things about sort of the philosophy of how they define packs as opposed to city level stuff, as opposed to rig level stuff. Um, and we should just keep going through some of these documents a little bit more. So hopefully we won't have too many more sessions on this. I might get a chance to do another one tonight. Um, but yeah, hopefully this is helpful. Yeah, recall that we really want this to work, right? We really want to be able to define well-defined projects that manage their own knowledge bases, that create knowledge moats, that put us ahead of the competition in some way, or scratch our particular itch, or learn something that nobody ever learned before. And we have that instinct that, if you've worked for a proprietary company, you know that information about that company is not in the public knowledge base, that you have to train agents to have read all of those documents and understand how your business operates so that they can answer your on-call questions or whatever. And that means that creating and operating that knowledge is something unique that your project or your business or whatever can do. Um, but that's only true, right, if you actually set up these agents to learn and evolve that knowledge base. It's possible that you could throw everything into a big data ocean, a big dumping ground for all of that information and knowledge. And, maybe a really, really smart agent could just boil the ocean on every question for you and potentially create tools to look up things on demand, and you could kind of get by with that. But how much better to scope down those agents, allow them to run in parallel, send them work that you want to send them, and let them do their thing in the background. That's the goal that we're trying to achieve here. And hopefully, if we do that, then we'll be able to seed a different project of interest with other procedures and other agents. And we'll be able to do it over and over again. Cool. I know I must repeat myself a lot across this session, but as always, thank you for watching. Hopefully, we'll be able to get pretty soon to what does happen if we throw our Gastown pack in with our ill-defined, underspecified meta routing pack and see what happens. So, all right. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll hope to catch you later.